Hello, here we are at the famous Royer Mansion, where we're gonna go on a ghost tour walk. But as you look behind me, this is definitely an old school house in the city of Orange. So excited to see what we find and see if we find any ghosts along the way.
Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
It's 8 o'clock, and amazingly, everybody's here. And so it begins. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We live on a placid isle of ignorance amongst the black seas of infinity. And it was not meant that we should travel far. How many of you believe in ghosts? How many of you do not believe in ghosts? You got dragged here, didn't you?
He did.
He did. Now, the one thing is we've been running this tour non-stop all year long for 10 years. And when we originally designed the tour, the one thing that we insisted upon is everything we're going to talk about tonight is true. All the history is completely true. All of the ghost stories that we're going to talk about tonight either came from the archives in Orange Library or from interviews with the people that live or work in the places that we're going to visit tonight. But in the end, I leave it to you. It's as Joseph Duniger, the 20th century mentalist, said, "Those who believe, no explanation is necessary, and those who do not believe, no explanation shall suffice." Including, I want to welcome you guys to the Royer Manor. Isn't this house beautiful? It's actually one of the oldest places we're going to talk about tonight. And everybody say hello to Valerie.
Hello. Hi, friends.
And she's going to tell you about this beautiful house.
Welcome to Royer Mansion. Dr. Daniel Franklin Royer sadly failed in just about every endeavor he had. Although he was well educated, he was a certified teacher and later a physician. But he ended up losing both careers. Distraught, he took his remaining savings and moved here to Orange. He married a widow and raised a daughter and 2 stepdaughters. His daughter would later pass away right in that room. His wife would also fall ill, and he would refuse to treat her. He sent her to Los Angeles for treatment. And after a messy divorce, which was rare in those days, he left this house to his daughter. In 1929, the house was turned into a mortuary. And as you can see, the front looks very different today. The columns were added to the front of the house, as was the style for mortuaries. And a front porch was built to make room for the freezers for the bodies. The freezers are still there today. In the 1980s, a real estate developer by the name of Gene Seacrest bought this house and converted it into individual office buildings. Now, he brought 2 construction workers in here who were allowed to sleep at night. And while they each chose separate living quarters, they would experience strange and frightening things that would make them sleep closer and closer together until they ended up right there together in that front room. When Gene Seacrest came to pay the men their last paycheck, he found effigy candles and other objects that are used in the protection of evil. The men said that they had seen the apparition of a young woman who was believed to be Royer's daughter. Today, it still serves as office suites. And there was a woman working here late one night when she said that she heard sounds of scratching coming from the freezers. When she went over to see, she found nothing amiss. And the old embalming room, there in the back, is now a lawyer's office. And it is known for its poltergeist activity. When water bottles and other small objects have flown across the room. It would appear that lawyers have a bad reputation, even in the netherworlds. So keep your loved ones close, for who knows what these spirits may be lurking in the dark. Off we go. Here we are at the Elks Lodge. This was originally owned by a group called the Oddfellows, who were a lot like the Freemasons. Their meeting spot was originally across the street over at Watson's Drugs. And during the 1920s, they took out a $100,000 loan to build this magnificent structure. And they finished just in time for the Great Depression. So they were unable to pay him the loan. So they sold it to the Elks, and they moved back across the street. Now there was an experience here that was relayed to my friend over here from the doorman. He said that they hired a dishwasher to work here to clean up after events at night. The dishwasher knew that he would be the last person here at night. So once when he was in the kitchen, a well-dressed man came up to him to ask him a question. Now the dishwasher was busy. He couldn't be bothered. And he was wearing headphones, so he couldn't even hear the man. So he just waved him along, and the well-dressed man went on his way. Later, the doorman and the dishwasher were walking down the hallway where there are pictures lined up of the former Legion's leaders. The dishwasher pointed to one of the pictures on the wall and said, "That is the man who tried to talk to me." It was one of the former leaders, and he has been dead for over 20 years. Now, paranormal experiences have occurred here since the early 1970s, when this was home to Orange Sporting Goods. Customers and employees alike would feel that somebody was watching them, and they felt that something was literally breathing down their necks. And sometimes they even felt something brush up against them. Now, those who have claimed to be psychic and physically sensitive would come into this building and would feel the sudden need to leave immediately. There was once a UPS man who was delivering uniforms here when he fell down the stairs. When someone came to his aid, he said, "I did not fall down the stairs. I was pushed." Luckily, he landed on the uniform, so he was not seriously harmed. And lastly, there was a worker here late who heard a voice by the register say, "Look over here." And when he did, the window next to the register shattered. So that's when Dennis bought this and turned it into Chapman Antiques. Now, does everyone know how an antique store works? You rent out a cubicle and you're able to sell your items. Well, there would be customers here who would be interested in certain items for sale. However, the price tags were nowhere to be seen. So Dennis would call the dealer up and would ask about the tags, and the dealer insisted, "I put those tags on there just the week before. I can't explain why they're gone." This happened over the course of 2 years. When the dealer moved, when he retired, Dennis began to clear out his items from the store. And they came across a very large, very heavy, bolted bookcase that required several people to move. When they moved the case out of the way, there were all the price tags, neatly stacked along the wall. Dennis also said he was leaving one day when a mirror hanging on the wall was there, but when he came back, the mirror was on the floor, completely unbroken. Now, we don't know who owns this store today. People tend to come and go, but nobody stays for very long. So whoever is here now might be in for a wild ride, and I wish them the best of luck. In 1854, there were two lawyers who were based out of Los Angeles, who owned 5,400 acres of land along Santiago Creek. They wanted to establish a town in an area with a good water supply and rich fertile soil for the growing citrus industry. Their names were Alfred Chapman and Andrew LaSalle. This was originally Richland, California. And by 1876, the town had grown large enough to need a post office. So when they went to apply for township, they found that there was already a Richland, California. So legend has it, the name of Orange was settled in a game of poker. By 1886, the town of Orange was officially incorporated into the state of California. It is the only town in California that is built around a plaza, and it is also the only, and it's where the historic fountain that you see before you. So here is a photo of the fountain. Now this is not what we have today as the original fountain. This is the 1937 replacement. The original cast iron fountain lives over at the Orange Public Library. Did anyone happen to see it as you were arriving this evening? Kind of tucked back there in the parking lot?
There it is in 1886. The original fountain.
Now, this plaza has a bit of a darker history. Around the turn of the 20th century, two young boys were playing in the plaza when one of them ran into the street. The other instinctively ran after his friend, and the two were trampled by a carriage. After that, business owners said that they saw two young boys playing in the plaza, dressed in knickers and suspenders. When they would ask the boys to leave, they had vanished. And during the 1995 production of the film, That Thing You Do, starring Tom Hanks, the production assistant came to set one day and found two young boys playing in the plaza. Upset that they had somehow managed to get into a closed set, she went over to get the security guard, and when they both came back, the boys were gone. So keep your eyes peeled tonight as you're driving, and make sure to keep yourself safe. Now, is anyone here a fan of American Horror Story? Well, that Chase Bank across the street was featured in season 7 as the butchery restaurant. Santa Ana and Orange are both popular film locations for the series. Let's continue.
Now, we are right outside this location. This is Pixley's Furniture Store. The Pixley name is huge in this town. A couple streets over, there's a Pixley Avenue and a Pixley Mansion. Now, don't think about it, but what's the first thing you see in this photo? What's the first thing you see? You're focusing. What are you looking at? Rocking chair. What do you see, sir?
The horse.
The horse. What do you see, miss?
The bikes.
And what do you see? The horse. See, a lot of people focus on the horse or the rocking chair, but what a lot of people miss, they miss the sign. It says Orange Undertaker Parlor. It's a furniture store and it's the morgue. Well, who's making the caskets? The furniture maker. Back then, you didn't have to actually have any medical experience to be the coroner. You just had to look down and say, yep, his ass is dead. Okay, so this horse did not deliver a chest of drawers. A body has just arrived. And they will bring a body through a busy furniture store down into an elevator. The elevator will go down into the basement. So the body is processed, the casket will be made, and then the body will go through the busy furniture store again to be loaded up and taken to Fairhaven. Who thinks that's weird? A little bit? Well, the only thing is we're looking at history with 20th century eyes. This is a farming community. It would not be unusual to see a dead body, including, you see these large bay windows? Wouldn't be used just for the displaying of furniture. Let's say you found a body you couldn't identify. What do? You pack it in ice and you stick it up in the window like a Victorian milk carton. Have you seen me? This place was actually a mortuary all the way up until the 1940s. And that is when the accidents happened. A young woman came here to say goodbye to a recently deceased relative. And when she went down into the elevator failed and it plummeted down into the sub-basement and she was killed in the accident. People have actually reported seeing a woman in 1940s clothing in both the store as well as the apartments upstairs. It's so much part of the history of the building that we've contacted people who do work up there and they were told, here's your lease, here's your key. By the way, there's a ghost story. Now, before we leave the old mortuary, I want to show you some of Pixley's better customers. These are all funerals from the town of Orange. Do you guys know what kind of flower you bring to a funeral? Lilies. Covers the smell of the body. Now, before we leave the old mortuary, how do you guys feel about the concept of being buried alive? Not so much? No. How many people do you think were buried alive?
A lot.
Well, I guess we'll never know. But they did actually disinter coffins where lining of the coffin has been scratched out. Could you imagine living in a small town where the medical knowledge isn't so good and you might have slipped into a coma only to be prematurely buried to wake up in your own grave? People like Edgar Allan Poe were helping the situation and they published 4 stories that were bestsellers about being buried alive. Now the one thing is, this actually started a new ritual. Instead of burying somebody right away, they would put you in bed and they'd wait 24 hours. We now call it awake. And then of course, devices to keep you from being buried alive, including Bateson's Belfry, which was actually a small bell that was attached to the top of your tombstone. And if by chance you did wake up, you could simply ring the bell and hopefully somebody is sober on top to get you. How many of these do you think Bateson sold? How many people were saved? None. But Bateson himself sold the patent and he became extremely wealthy because of it. But by today's standards, he would be called obsessive compulsive. And one night, he decided to end it all. He committed suicide by self-immolation. He set himself on fire, completely eliminating the possibility of being buried alive. Who's hungry? Let's go. Now, before we talk about our next location, let me ask you guys something. How do you guys feel about seeing pictures of dead bodies? Okay, I mean, I'm going to show them anyway. Okay, so I'm going to set the scene up for you, okay? It's family photo time. Everybody shows up, even your drunk uncle. He has the audacity to die on the couch. What do? You take the picture anyways.
No.
In reality, post-mortem photography is a perfect storm. It is emotional trauma from the Civil War. It is the birth of spiritualism, and it's the invention of photography. You see, they didn't want to remember you as if you were dead. They want to remember you as if you were alive. And if you didn't get that picture in life, you might get it in death. So, let's start with something light, shall we? Baby pictures. The child's dead. They painted the eyes on the child.
Oh no.
One where a young woman is posing with her parents. Now, for people that are familiar with Victorian photography, you should know that they have an extra long exposure time. That's how come a lot of Victorian photos are actually blurry. The people that are perfectly sharp in the photo, it's because they're dead, they're not even breathing. Here's another one where the eyes have been painted on. Not as well done, probably done at Kmart. And then this one is my favorite. I call it Somebody's Gonna Need Therapy Later. She was forced to pose with her dead brother. and they draped his arm over her shoulder. Now I get people to say, how do you get him to stand up? And I go, it's easy. You just need one of these. Now, when we designed the tour, I knew we had to have a restaurant on it. Because Orange is known for two things only, antique stores and restaurants. But every restaurant that was known for its activity, and we asked the owner if we could talk about it, they're like, no, we want people to come. Unless, of course, you ever dine at Rue Gourds across the street. They are actually very proud of their paranormal activity. For people that have been in Orange for a long time, it used to be known as Tony's Mexican Food. But it was purchased by Victoria, who owned the Rue de Gorge chain. And she transformed it back into a 1915 arts and craft home. Now there's a very common theory that when you do restoration on a place that is known for its activity, the activity will spike. And that's exactly what happened. Pictures would pop off of the wall. Doors would swell, even on cold mornings. And they would open for nobody, and then somebody would just walk by it, and it would pop open. Faucets would turn on in the middle of the night, and the employees would see them running in the morning. The owner was quite dismayed. She was afraid that the activity would actually cause the business to fail. But it is actually, of the three, it is the most popular of all their restaurants. They have a symbiotic relationship with it now. Every once in a while, something really weird happens. Everybody acknowledges it, and life goes on. One of my favorite stories was actually one of the busboys was clearing a table. And it was right up against the wall, but the wall was all windows. And as he was clearing the table, only one window on the entire wall started to shake violently. He said it was almost as if a freight train was going by. And then the window stopped, and he felt a cool breeze of air go past him. Several spirits have been spotted in the house, including when you walk into the main dining room, there's a second dining room. And people have spotted an elderly woman standing there. And when you do a double take, she is gone. And also a gentleman in a checked work shirt has been spotted, and a small child in the kitchen. The food is quite good. I like to go there during the Halloween holiday. They make a great pumpkin hummus. But just remember, when you go there and you sit down, the empty table next to you is probably not as empty as you thought. Let's make our way back towards the plaza.
Here we are at the Victorian Tea Manor. Isn't it beautiful? I would love to live here. Well, the First National Bank of Orange opened in 1905 and was managed by William Granger. Together with his family, he moved here to this house, which was built just the year before. It later served as a boarding house and most recently a tea room and restaurant. And no activity was reported here until the owner of the restaurant brought in some Victorian antiques. So I ask you, if a house can be haunted, can an object also be haunted? There are known spirits in this house. An elderly woman, a young woman, and two small children. There are also deaths associated with this house. A young woman was admiring the view from the balcony right there when she fell to her death. She severed her spinal cord. And there are also two young children who have passed away in this house. When an EVP session was conducted, they found the sounds of laughter and playing coming from inside. So when the Victorian objects were taken out of the house after the restaurant was sold, It was Chapman University bought this house and turned it into the alumni room. And when Chapman was asked if any activity remains, their answer was, no comment.
It is absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Now, sorry.
No, go ahead.
There is, when this house stood vacant, after the restaurant was sold, the residents across the street said that they saw the apparition of a young woman there in the window.
Those fish tacos, right? It's the Vineland Hotel. Kind of cool, isn't it? Built in the 1880s. It's one of the oldest buildings in Orange. It was a middle-class hotel. Now, a lot of people who lived in Orange for a long time didn't even know the building was there. Because the person who owned this building right here, used to be a church, also owned the old Vineland Hotel. And so, to buy themselves a little extra space, they built a fake facade that went from the end of this building all the way to Country Roads Antiques, completely encapsulating the front of the Vineland Hotel inside of it. So you could actually walk through the Vineland Hotel onto its front porch and you're still inside of another building. Bottom about 400 extra square feet. They actually used to hold church services and Sunday schools in the old hotel. But the only thing is, they did not know how to take care of an old Victorian building. And after several years, by the way, there's a shortage of mufflers in this town. So after a couple of years of bad rain, they were forced to abandon the hotel. Now the thing is that for many years the old Vineland was known for its ghost stories. And so, we knew the person who had access to the building. Welcome to the Vineland Hotel. It's not an orb, it's a dust particle. Okay? Now, she spoke very briefly about EVPs. You guys know what an EVP is? Electronic voice phenomenon? Now, we were allowed to set up microphones throughout the Vineland Hotel. And then we'd come back days later to pick them up and listen to the recording. In the upstairs section, we picked up the sound of muffled conversations, a lot like when you go to a hotel and you hear people talking next door. That's exactly what it sounds like, even though we were the only people who had access to the building. And downstairs, in the old kitchen area, we have it on tape of us all having a conversation. And in the background, you hear the wailing of a horse. Now, I grew up in a rural area of San Diego known as El Cajon. I know what a horse sounds like. And so we went to our tech guy and we asked him, is this the original tape? And he said, that's it. Nothing's been filtered or anything. So we contacted the person who ran the old building. And he pulled out the blueprints and he showed us that is the last part of the extension of the hotel. Because that section used to be a stagecoach stop. So we picked up an EVP not of a person, but of a horse that's been dead for over 100 years.
And this 1928 Mediterranean-style building was built and dedicated to all of the men and women who served in World War I. As with most American Legion buildings, it contains a bar. Now the bartender here has said this building is haunted. He said that he could hear the sounds of voices coming from inside, even though he knew he was the only one there. Perhaps there are former members who are unaware that their dues are up. He also said that place settings at tables for events would be rearranged on their own. Now, the former leader of this building has said that he is afraid of this place and he does not like to go upstairs, which is the area that's known for its poltergeist activity.
I had somebody last year who actually walked off of the tour And she sent me an email later and she wanted her money back. She said I talked too much about history. I just wrote back, you suck. But the one thing is, even though this is not my hometown, this has become my adopted town over the years. And I want to share with you, every once in a while, a picture comes through the archives and I'll look at it and I go, you know what, I go this way on the tour, so I want to show you what this town looked like one time. This is what we're going to do. We're going to put a camera on top of the old newspaper building, which is now Starbucks. And we're going to point that camera going this way. This is this alleyway at the turn of the century.
Oh, wow.
Now, do you see the overhang in the flat roof? There's the overhang in the flat roof right there. Hasn't changed at all. They had to cut down the overhang because they didn't need covered wagons anymore. This is actually the delivery dock of Eileen and Grote's General Store, known as the Great White Store, because when you go out onto the main street, the bricks on the street are a beautiful glazed white, very expensive at the time period. Now, the person I want to talk about might be in this photo, I don't know, but he was an employee for Eileen and Grote. He was a delivery man, an excellent horseman, but he was most known for his singing voice. And one day, he will leave home and he will go to Los Angeles. His name was William Boyd. We know him today as Hopalong Cassidy, the singing cowboy. He actually lived here in the town of Orange. Wait, who here has not heard of Hopalong Cassidy? I feel old. Okay, let's go.
Alright, here we are. Now this place is very active with energy. Most of the activity occurs in the basements. Our assistant manager was vacuuming here one night late. And she was in an intersection of the aisles. She was vacuuming, just, doing her thing. When all of a sudden, out of the corner of her eye, she saw something fly out from one of the cubicles. She stopped, so she looked, and then she saw a record fly out of the cubicle, and then another one, and another one. So she stopped the vacuum, she walked over to the cubicle, and she found all of the records had been taken out of the crate and fanned down on the floor neatly, as if somebody was examining the collection. Now there have been other incidents that have occurred here. Pictures will come off of the walls and will fall slowly to the ground without breaking. And items that have been mistakenly put in the wrong case under lock and key have been mysteriously found back where they belonged. Now, does anyone here collect antiques?
Not anymore.
Well, it is believed that the spirits of the dead can often be attached to their objects, and their energy can be imprinted on the object, and it might not always be a happy one. So, the next time that you are antique shopping, hold the object in your hand and see if it has a good energy, because the spirit might hold a fondness for it and might want to visit it and you. So if we can look across the street now, you might not be able to see it. It's the building with the blue and white striped awning. That is now Lollipop Nail Studio. But originally, it was the first motorcycle shop of Orange, built in 1915. Now there was a worker here by the name of Bertie Claypool, and he's pictured in this photograph. And he was working in the shop late at night when the lantern he was holding fell to the oil and gasoline soaked floor, and the shop burst into flames, and Bertie perished in the fire. And to this day, people have seen the apparition of a man on fire. They have also smelled the smell of smoke and have seen flames out of the corners of their eyes. Now, this is most likely a residual haunting, not an intelligence. Because with a residual haunting, you cannot interact with it. When a traumatic event such as this happens, the event is often imprinted at the site, replaying over and over again, like a record player skipping in time. Now, that building has been renovated many times, but the smell of the smoke from the fire has been embedded in the bricks, so you can't get rid of it. But that doesn't explain why we can still smell smoke sometimes from Antique Station across the street, because that building wasn't built until the 1950s. So before you pull the fire alarm, stop and think that maybe that might be something otherworldly. Let's continue.
I'm a teacher. I teach dance, and I'm used to yelling over 20 kids and loud music.
She yells at kids, everybody.
Yelling over kids.
Yell at kids.
Sorry about that, friends. All right, we have time for one more stop tonight. Here we are at El Ranchito Restaurant. And I've eaten here because it's haunted. And the food is really good, so I highly recommend it. And as you can tell, this was once a church. This is the First Baptist Church of Orange. And it was also suffered structural damage in the Long Beach earthquake. Now the general manager has reported hearing the sounds of pots and pans clashing and shaking on their own when they were the only ones in the building, because the restaurant hadn't opened for the day yet. And employees and customers alike have reported seeing in the main dining area what is known as shadow people. The shadow people are often patches of shadow that are interpreted as living entities and interpreted as spirits. Now, I'm sure you know when you go out to dinner that there are kids that are allowed to kind of go off and wander on their own. Parents just let them play. Well, I don't recommend that. Well, there was a family dining here once, and their young son wanted to assert his independence and use the restroom on his own. So after he had been gone for a while, his father went to check on him, and he found his son cowering in the corner of the bathroom. Something had terrified him. And when his father asked what had happened, the little boy said, "I don't want to play with the little girl." Well, it would appear that this restaurant has an added bonus. A young ghostly girl for the children to play with while they dine. Now, this tour has been happening for 10 years now. And so we get people on these tours who have experienced things of their own. And often they will share their stories with us. So there was a group of people that came on this tour, and they said that when they were dining here, a girl had gone into the restroom. And while she was in there, she heard the sounds of laughter, giggling, and the faucets running. So when she came back out, she asked her friend if anyone had come and gone when she was inside. And her friend said, "No, you were the only one in there." Now, the history of this church is so well known through documentation that whatever is occurring here is most likely not associated with the church itself, but probably with the land that it's built on, or an object that was brought in. Perhaps another haunted antique.
Well, this is where I'm going to leave you. Does anybody have any questions about anything we talked about, people we spoke of, or people we slandered? No? Well, you allowed me to start the evening off with a little H.P. Lovecraft, and for that I thank you. And so, we will actually end tonight with two of my favorites. George Bernard Shaw, who said, "Life does not cease to be serious when you laugh, just as it doesn't cease to be funny when you die." Life is both serious and it's funny. So why should death be any different? And of course, my favorite poet, it's me. Tonight we walked where spirits dwell, and we heard the stories they had to tell. We laughed a bit and we shuddered some, but most of all, we had some fun. And as we lie awake in our beds, we fear not spirits of the dead. Those who need to fear the ghost is the one who did not properly think their horse. Yes, it's subtle, I know. Did you guys have a good time?
Yes.
Now, if you did enjoy it, I would invite you to please go to any of our other cities. We have San Juan Capistrano, we have Santa Ana, and Black Star Canyon. That is a hike at night with no extra light. Enjoy. Be careful driving home tonight, everybody. We have enough ghosts on this tour as it is. Thank you so much for coming.